Welcome to Word Pictures, a program of discussion and discovery. We examine the stories, events, and persons as described in the Word Pictures, presented in the 66 books of Scripture we know as the Word of God. But what kind of God is pictured here? By reading these stories, some become fearful, others adore. Yet others are just confused. Come, let us see for ourselves in an unrehearsed, no-question-barred discussion with people just like you as we search for the God of these stories. What picture of God will emerge for you? Let's join the discussion right now.
Welcome to Word Pictures. We're doing a quick overview of the Bible, and so far we've gotten through the books of Moses, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, and we're in the book of Joshua and perhaps Judges today. We're looking especially at what this says to us about God, about His character, and what He's like. So, open your Bibles to Joshua chapter 1 and join our discussion. Ken?
Thanks, Gordon. I would like to start with a verse that has a lot of implications for all of the Old Testament, and it's found at the end of Joshua 1. And if you have a Bible, I'd like you to look at it so you make sure that we're not misreading it. It's Joshua 1, and I'll start with verse 16, but we want to focus really on verse 18. They answered, now this is the people responding to Joshua, "We will do everything you have told us, and we will go anywhere you send us." Does that remind you of anything that might have happened back in Exodus? Yeah. The people said, all that the Lord has said we will do, 3 times, right? And then 6 weeks later they were dancing, dunking naked around the golden calf. So here we are, we will go anywhere you send us. We will obey you just as we always obeyed Moses. And I think that Joshua probably about that time was ready to faint.
Weren't most of the ones that left Egypt, weren't they most of them gone?
Yeah.
Dead by that time?
Remember that everybody was over 20 years of age was dead.
Yeah, so
These
here
are
it
the
is,
young
just
people.
as we've obeyed.
Yep, exactly.
So how old are these people?
Well, the oldest of them, now it doesn't actually say, it says that the men over 20 died.
Now
Doesn't say that the women over 20 died, but we sort of assume that.
and now when we're entering Joshua, the children of Israel have wandered around for 40 years.
In the wilderness.
Finally now they're getting ready to
And Moses
go into the
brought
promised
them,
land.
Moses brought them up to the other side of the Jordan River. They had some experiences there, including rebellion and other things like this. Then Moses climbed Mount Nebo and died, and Joshua takes charge, and they're ready to cross the Jordan River and to enter the promised land.
And so this is...
That's where we are. And so they're promising the world to the new leader. Okay? They say, whatever you say, we'll do it, right?
and the oldest here are, what, about 60?
Well, the exception of Joshua and Caleb, remember, those are the 2 spies that were preserved. Presumably, everybody else is 60 or under.
So how old is Joshua?
Well, Joshua was, I think, 15 years older. He was like 35 or something like that when that happened. Caleb, I've forgotten, he ended up 85. He was somewhere about that age, too. So they were 15, 20 years older than anybody else.
So we're talking old codgers leading the group here.
Yeah.
Careful.
Okay. So we will obey you just as we always obeyed Moses. And may the Lord your God be with you as he was with Moses. Then we go to verse 18. Whoever questions your authority or disobeys any of your orders will be put to death. Be determined and confident. What does that tell you about their attitude toward life and death?
It makes me wonder how much they've been teaching this new generation and what they've been teaching them.
Yeah.
I mean, you got 40 years, what are they doing? They're not plowing fields, and they got a lot of time on their hands. Seems to me that they would have been
Food is provided,
teaching.
water's provided.
God must have had some teachers, and here, were they teaching them how rotten they people were that they let die out there in the wilderness over a period of 40 years?
Well, it's a little hard to tell kids that their parents are rotten.
Well, apparently so.
Yeah, this is kind of a heavy culture that they're trying to get out of, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking about comparing them with us. Back then, you know, it seemed like the kings, you know, really put down their fists to make sure that everybody followed them. I mean, it wasn't like you can follow me if you want. No, you're dead if you don't. You know, and it's just like that. I mean, I don't think they would be surprised at this at all. They'd say, so, you know.
Maybe they had, maybe after the 40 years in the wilderness, they had learned their lessons, and that having problems among one another were very rare. So this would, to come up with something where you violated these commands, that was so rare that we're talking about a serious...
You can't be serious about that.
Well...
Read the book of Numbers. I mean, it's full of all sorts of crazy things going on.
You're a dreamer,
Well,
man.
what was that 40 years for?
Well, I mean, that's a good question. You would have thought that in 40 years they had nothing to do except get educated and build a tabernacle, learn how to worship God. I mean, the food was provided, the water was provided, if clothes didn't wear out, the shoes didn't wear out. I mean, what do they have to do? Well, you know, maybe leisure is the danger.
Didn't have any temptation.
They're not very humble. They didn't say, God helping us, we can do it.
No.
No humility.
Well, there's a couple of things. Let's think about why they might have made this kind of statement. And one of the things that strikes your mind immediately is, well, life was cheap. The other possibility that we sometimes don't consider is that sin was considered very serious. Maybe so.
Well, not obeying for sure.
Yeah.
Now you were pointing out that life is cheap. If life is so cheap, how does this sacrifice make any impression on them when animals are killed?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think it would at all.
Well,
I mean, if they could kill
obviously-
people just like that.
Obviously, they got to the place where sacrificing animals by the scores and by the hundreds and even by the hundreds of thousands didn't seem to impress people too much.
No, wait a minute. Maybe they weren't having to do that. We'll go back to my premise here is maybe they were...
In the wilderness, they probably weren't offering sacrifices to speak of.
You know, I mean...
Even in the tabernacle?
I've mentioned this kind of a thing before. If I was one of those people in that camp and I had to offer a sacrifice every time I sinned, I'd be out of lambs pretty quick.
Well,
and how long is that? How long? Every time you had a problem, you went to the tent. How long was that line each day in front of that tent?
Exactly.
So, and
Then they still had the Passover, didn't they, during that
Yes.
time? Because they
Yes.
ever since they left Egypt, they did
Yes.
that, right?
Yes. And morning and evening, there was a morning and evening sacrifice, and they had to offer at least one lamb every morning and one lamb every afternoon. That was the minimum.
That was for the whole nation.
yes,
That was for the whole nation.
That was
For the individual sins
Yeah.
was whenever they occurred, which
But I'm just
I'm
talking.
sure wasn't very often.
Yeah.
Was there so this applied to perhaps an unrepentant attitude? If you violated these, but you were repentant, you didn't have to suffer the
Well,
death?
maybe in light of that, we should go back over to Numbers 15 and just have a look about repentant versus unrepentant. Look at Numbers 15. And I will read starting with verse 32 first. Once while the Israelites were, and I'm reading from my Good News Bible, once while the Israelites were still in the wilderness, a man who was found gathering firewood on the Sabbath. He was taken to Moses, Aaron, and the whole community, and was put under guard because it was not clear what should be done with him. Then the Lord said to Moses, "The man must be put to death. The whole community is to stone him to death outside the camp." So the whole community took him outside the camp and stoned him to death as the Lord had commanded, for gathering sticks on the Sabbath. Okay.
Did the Lord say it with that inflection? Could he have said, the man must now be put to death?
Yeah.
We need
Very
to take
gently.
him. That's right. We need to take him outside
Well-
camp, and this is, this is
Okay.
what you do with this kind of a thing.
I'm not quite sure though that guy was just made a little mistake there. I think he might have been really rebelling for some reason.
Well, the reason I gave the inflection I did is because those verses follow some other verses. Go back to 27, Numbers 15. If any of you sin unintentionally, you are to offer a 1-year-old female goat as a sin offering. At the altar the priest shall perform the ritual of purification to purify you from your sin, and you will be forgiven. The same regulation applies to all who unintentionally commit a sin, whether they are native Israelites or resident foreigners. But any who sin deliberately. Now, we have suggested that sin is what?
Rebellion.
Rebellion. Is that intentional or unintentional?
Intentional.
Sounds pretty intentional, doesn't it? If any who sin deliberately, whether they are natives or foreigners, are guilty of treating the Lord with contempt, they shall be put to death, because they have rejected what the Lord said and have deliberately broken one of his commands. They are responsible for their own death. So how many of us would be left?
Well,
Don't you?
In the herd real quick.
what's the point of saying deliberate? I mean, isn't it possible that people can decide not to do deliberate sins? Even
Well,
though
it
they're
would be
still
nice,
sinning, but at
would be
least the
nice.
deliberate ones you
Well,
can kind of choose not to do.
There's
It mentions in the previous passage that there are some it refers to unintentional sins.
Yes.
And doesn't Paul pray a prayer to forgive us of the sins that we're not sure, where we don't know we're making or doing or something?
Were there people going around pointing out other people's unintentional sin? Because if it's
Well, you know,
if it's unintentional, how do you even know about it?
yeah. An example, one clear example from Scripture is the person who kills somebody else unintentionally. And the cities of refuge were for that purpose. If you were swinging your axe and the axe head flies off and kills somebody completely unintentionally, you could run to the city of refuge and you were safe. And your case would come up and they would decide, yes, this was an accident, and so long as you stayed in that city until the high priest died, you were safe. And when the high priest died, all debts, all sins, etc., all private justice kind of stuff was wiped out. You could go back home, and nobody, if they did anything to you, then they would be the murderers. Okay, so there's a known unintentional sin. Okay, I don't know how you'd unintentionally commit fornication or rape or or lying, or I don't know. I suppose people could.
Well, the term sin, certainly in modern Christianity, implies forethought.
Yes.
It does seem kind of
Premeditated.
bad just because your axe head
But
flew off.
if you define sin as missing the mark, then that
That's
because I've
the
read
meaning of the Greek word hamartia.
yeah, and read where it says that it's a sin to forget.
Mm-hmm.
You know who said that, and so.
Who said it's a sin to forget?
Ellen White. So, well, we need to think of the sequence of this.
So they would surely be unwittingly. Obviously, your wits weren't about you, so it'd be unwittingly, right?
Well, we need to move on because there's another part of this picture that we sometimes forget. What's going to happen to all the people who die in this way?
In what way?
Well, intentional or unintentional. What's going to happen to them?
They will be raised at the
John 5,
when Jesus
28
comes
and
the second or
29
third time.
says that every one of them is going to be raised, and how will they be judged?
According to
Everyone will be judged fairly by God, whether their sin was intentional or unintentional, etc. So this relatively short life, which we live here, in God, it's very important to us. We think this is the only life we know about. We think it's a big deal. God says, this tiny little piece of time that you live on earth is nothing. I'm looking at the eternity here. I want you to live forever. What if you die a few years early or a few years later in this life? That's nothing compared to what I planned for you.
Well, that's true, but it's the only life we get to do things right.
Well, but if you do things right, there's more life that you get.
Well, I know, but I've got to do it right to get that.
Well, so what I'm saying is what we think is really important, God probably thinks is a little bit less important. What we sometimes think is relatively unimportant, God thinks is absolutely the most important point of all. The life which we could experience if we get it right.
So what's that got to do with the guy and his sticks?
Well, he's still going to come up, and he's still going to be judged by God fairly in the judgment. And if that was a mistake, and God knows his heart, if that was a mistake, God will say, welcome to the kingdom.
So some things may have been done to avoid confusion, maybe, and
Possibly, yeah.
At that second time, they can kind of put it in the real reality.
An excellent example, there's two examples, real obvious examples back in the writings of Moses. One is the death of the firstborn in Egypt. They didn't die because they had committed some kind of sin. They died because they were the firstborn, and they were the ones who were supposed to be specifically protected by the Egyptian gods. So the battle back there was between the true God and the Egyptian gods. So who do you attack? If they don't get the message after 9 other plagues, God says, okay, I will go after your firstborn, see if your gods can protect them. They died because they were firstborn, not because they had done anything wrong. And they will rise in the resurrection, and God will say, yes, some of you are safe to save, some of you are not. Another example is the flood.
So what you're saying about back to the sticks. So you're saying that they could haul this guy out and put him to death, and it might be a mistake? Is that what you're saying? But don't worry about it, because when the judgment occurs, God's going to take care of all that, and he'll get it straightened out, and the guy will get to go to heaven.
There's a bigger thing happening here than just that one person, and everybody's watching.
Yeah, that's
everybody's
the point.
trying to listen, trying to figure out what's happening.
If he comes back and say, I picked up all these sticks on Sabbath and nothing happened, how many more guys are going to do it the next Sabbath? So God has to put his foot down. I mean, look at the New Testament. Ananias and Sapphira died on the church floor.
So we're saying
because they cheated.
We're saying that the guy with the sticks, he might still get to go to heaven.
Yes. We can't prejudge God.
Well, on the first day of school, first week of school, first month of school, you have to make an example, and you have to start out tough to set the tone. If you don't, your whole year is just washed over like a tsunami.
I take exception to that you can't judge God. I think everybody judges God and his ways every day, because the judgment really ultimately is about God. So in fact, we're doing that to some extent right now. We're saying, hey, what does this tell us about God? Do we admire God? Are we willing to learn from his history, what he's like, and do we want to follow along?
But look,
we're
judging based on all his history too. Back when the sticks were committed, there wasn't so much history. Jesus hadn't even come to show what God is like.
And there are no Bibles to read.
This is a book about God, and that's what we're trying to find out. What does it tell us about God?
I want to go on to chapter 2 of Joshua. Then Joshua sent 2 spies from the camp at Acacia. Now it's flood season. The river is going down, heavy flow down from the Sea of Galilee down to the Dead Sea, big, heavy river going down. And here are the children of Israel camped on one side, and Jericho's on the other side. And the people in Jericho are saying, well, it looks worrisome with those people over there. We know what they've done. They wiped out a couple of nations already, but don't worry, there's no way they can get across the river. Okay? No way they can get across the river. So that's what's happening here. When they came to this, with orders to go and secretly explore the land of Canaan, he says, pick out some spies, especially the city of Jericho. When they came to the city, they went to spend the night in the house of a prostitute named Rahab. So the first question is, why did they go to the house of the prostitute?
Somewhere they could get in.
And it's someplace where you probably not too many people asking questions.
But they're watching.
They might be.
Somebody was watching.
Like Vegas, what happens in this house stays in this house.
Right. Okay, the king of Jericho heard that some Israelites had come that night to spy out the country. So he sent word to Rahab, the men in your house have come to spy out the whole country. Bring them out. And what happened? Some men did come to my house, she answered, but I don't know where they were from. They left at sundown before the city gate was closed. I didn't find out where they were going, but if you start out after them quickly, you can catch them. Now Rahab had taken the 2 spies up on the roof and hidden them under some stalks of flax that she had put there. The king's men left the city, and then the gate was shut. They went looking for the Israelite spies as far as the place where the road crosses the Jordan. So
she lied, intentionally.
She intentionally lied. And the first question I would like to ask you, if you were one of those spies up on the roof, hiding under the flax, what would you be praying? Please help Rahab to tell the truth?
Help me not to sneeze, and help her be convincing.
For being convinced.
Help
But
her to lie well. Is that
God,
what you're saying?
please help Rahab lie well.
How about telling the truth and lying at the same time, like some people do?
How do you do that?
Well, they use double meanings all the time. They say, "Well, I told it the right way. It's just you took it wrong."
Yeah, well,
But she just flat out said that these people had left,
yeah.
and so there's nothing there, no equivocation. She lied. There's no doubt about it.
Okay, so
Let's hope they had legitimate reasons to pick that house.
yes.
That they weren't
I
had.
thought you were going to comment on that. Maybe you knew what the reasons were.
Well, maybe they were. Never mind. Let's go on with this story.
They were led by God to that house. That's what you're going to say, right?
Let's go on with the story.
Oh, they were.
does God permit a lie?
Well, let's read the rest of the story. It might be a clue.
Okay.
Before the spies settled down for the night, Rahab went up on the roof and said to them, I know that the Lord has given you this land. Does she know something about Yahweh already? Now, if you've got a Bible, a usual English Bible, Lord will be in small caps, meaning it's what word?
Yahweh.
Yahweh. This is the personal name for Israelites' God. I know your God, personally named Yahweh, is going to give you this land. How did she know that? Well, we read on. Everyone in the country is terrified of you. We have heard how the Lord dried up the Red Sea in front of you when you were leaving Egypt. We have also heard how you killed Sihon and Og, the two Amorite kings east of the Jordan. We were afraid as soon as we heard about it. We've all lost our courage because of you. The Lord your God is God in heaven above and here on earth. Now swear by him that you will treat my family as kindly as I have treated you, and give me some sign that I can trust you. Promise me that you will save my father and mother, my brothers and sisters, and all their families. Don't let us be killed. Now, is it fair for a prostitute? And in those days, Jericho was one of the cities that was dedicated to the moon god, and the moon god was particularly known for its licentiousness. And she probably was some kind of a temple prostitute, one of these moon god prostitutes, we would call them, but special people that serve that god. Is it right for her to, because she saved a couple men one night, ask that all her family and all their families be saved? I mean, maybe herself, but this whole gang?
Isn't she showing some form of faith here?
Yeah.
Because she could have turned him in and been a hero.
Yeah.
And she could have,
For a day or two.
yeah, for a day or two, but she didn't do that. Plus, she really put herself in danger, because if they found those spies, she would be in with them, and then she would get whacked too. So there was some danger there, and she was showing faith at that point.
I think God is interested in responding to anybody who is interested in pursuing Him.
Okay.
No matter what kind of a person they are, or how misunderstanding they may have of what He is or what He's like, He's accepting.
Well, you
Okay.
know, she was very wise. She was politically aware. She had thought it out. She knew the Jewish people were out there. She had already made those conclusions. And so,
She heard some rumors, right?
well, she really believed them.
Okay.
Yeah.
The men said to her, I read on, verse 14, May God take our lives if we don't do as we say. If you do not tell anyone what we have been doing, we promise that that when the Lord gives us this land, we will treat you well. How do they know for sure that God would treat her well?
Well, they knew.
Rahab lived in a house built into the city wall so that she let the men down from the window by a rope. Go into the hill country, she said, or the king's men will find you. Hide there for 3 days until they come back. After that, you can go on your way. She knew what to do. Now you wonder how many other husbands she had said that to. You know, you're not quite sure. The men said to her, "We will keep the promise that you have made us give. This is what you must do. When we invade your land, tie this red cord to the window that you let us down from. Get your father and mother, your brothers, and all your father's family together in your house. If anyone goes out of the house, his death will be his own fault, and we will not be responsible. But if anyone in the house with you is harmed, then we will be responsible. However, if you tell anyone what we have been doing, then we will not have to keep our promise which you have made us give you." She agreed and sent them away. When they had gone, she tied the red cord to the window. And what was the conclusion to the whole story?
It worked.
It worked.
They saw the red cord and did not attack that house.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's sure a trade of services there, wasn't there?
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
But
you save our
obvious-
lives, we'll,
Yes,
you
but
know.
obviously God knew down the road because Rahab contributed quite a bit to our history.
Do we know who these two guys were? Did I miss
No.
that? Or?
No,
You know, and here they were. I mean, when they went back, there's no information here that Joshua had given them any authority to make these kinds of deals.
and they're dealing not just on behalf of Joshua, they're dealing on behalf of God.
That's right. And they went, and I would assume that Joshua picked these two guys because they had integrity and knowledge and awareness of God and what God would do. They were men of strong faith. And when they got back there and they told Joshua what had happened, why, they knew that Joshua would respect the commitments that they had made in their behalf, I think.
Okay.
Well, God must have respected it too, because when the wall tumbled down all around, Rahab's house didn't fall.
Let's read about that. That's Joshua 6, starting with verse 22. The walls have already fallen down. Joshua then told the two men who had served as spies, "Go into the prostitute's house and bring her and her family out as you promised her." So they went in and brought Rahab out, along with her father and mother, her brothers, and the rest of her family. They took them all, family and slaves, even the slaves, notice, to the safety near the Israelite camp. Then they set fire to the city and burned it to the ground, along with everything in it except the things made of gold, silver, bronze, iron, which they took and put in the Lord's treasury. But Joshua spared the lives of the prostitute Rahab and all her relatives because she had hidden the two spies that he sent to Jericho. And then her descendants have lived in Israel to this day. And I heard Myra say something about her history. Where do you get all that
Her
story?
descendants, well, that comes later.
Look at the end of Ruth. The very end, actually, let's see. Yeah. Look at Ruth chapter 4 in verses 18 to 22. This is the family line from Perez to David. Perez, Hezron, Ram, Amminadab, Nahshon, Salmon, Boaz, Obed, Jesse, David. Okay, now keep those names in mind briefly while I jump over to Matthew 1 real quickly here and read you a couple of verse here.
Is that the male line?
This is the male line that we're talking
Now
about.
we're
Males.
going to the female line.
Well, now we're going to mention some women, and we're running out of time here, so don't go away if we have to take a break. Look at verses 2 to 6. From Abraham to King David, the following ancestors are listed. And if you look down there, it says Salmon, Boaz, his mother was Rahab. Rahab ended up marrying one of the chief men of the tribe of Judah. And the story goes on, so don't go away. Thank you for staying by. We were just finishing up with the story of Rahab, the spies, and Rahab from Joshua 2. And let me go back to Matthew 1 and read here who these famous people were. Hezron, Ram, Amminadab, you know, those are the names we were reading back there in Ruth. Nahshon, Salmon. Boaz was Salmon's son. His mother was Rahab. And Obed, his mother was Ruth. We'll talk about her later. Jesse and King David. So this Jericho prostitute, servant of probably the moon god, ends up being the great-grandmother of King David.
And an ancestor of Jesus.
And an ancestor of all the kings of Israel, actually of Judah to be more specific, and an ancestor of Jesus himself, as pointed out by Matthew 1 there and elsewhere. But there's some other stories that are also troubling in the book of Joshua. Look at Joshua 7. The Lord's command to Israel not to take from Jericho anything that was to be destroyed was not obeyed. A man named Achan disobeyed that order, and so the Lord was furious with the Israelites. We'll talk about that later. What does it mean when it says the Lord was furious with them? Achan was the son of Carmi and grandson of Zabdi and belonged to the clan of Zerah, a part of the tribe of Judah. Joshua sent some men from Jericho to Ai, a city east of Bethel near Bethaven, with orders to go and explore the land. When they had done so, they reported back to Joshua, "There is no need for everyone to attack Ai. Send only about 2,000 or 3,000 men. Don't send the whole army up there to fight. It's not a large city." So about 3,000 Israelites made the attack, but they were forced to retreat. The men of Ai chased them from the city gate as far as some quarries and killed about 36 of them on the way down the hill. Then the Israelites lost their courage and were afraid. What happened? Joshua and the leaders of Israel tore their clothes in grief, threw themselves to the ground before the Lord's covenant box, and lay there till evening, with dust on their heads to show their sorrow. Now, we tend not to display our grief and our sorrow that way in our day, but that was the way they did it in those days.
Well, Joshua was just being courageous. He knew they were supposed to conquer the land, so let's go.
Yeah. And Joshua said, "Sovereign Lord, why did you bring us across the Jordan at all to turn us over to the Amorites? I mean, we've already conquered 2 nations back there on the other side of the Jordan. Let us live there. Why did you bring us over here and humiliate us like this? Why didn't we just stay on the other side of the Jordan? What can I say, O Lord, now that Israel has retreated from the enemy? The Canaanites and everyone else in the country will hear about it. They will surround us and kill every one of us, and then what will you do to protect your honor?" Notice, whose honor is he concerned about?
God's honor.
God's honor. The Lord said to Joshua, "Get up. Why are you lying on the ground like this? Israel has sinned. They have broken the agreement with me that I ordered them to keep. They have taken some of the things condemned to destruction. They stole them, lied about it, and put them with their own things. This is why the Israelites cannot stand against their enemies." Now, next question. Who wasn't with the Israelites, or why did they lose that battle?
According to this passage, I would interpret it as because there was someone in the camp who was sinning.
Okay, what's the relationship between Achan? We're going to find out if there was Achan. What's the relationship between Achan's sin and their losing the battle and 36 men dying?
Well, there was somebody made the decision that they didn't need so many men. Where did that come from?
Well, but 3,000 men should have been enough to conquer the city, shouldn't it?
Not to make the walls fall down like Jericho.
You don't have to make the walls fall down.
Anyway, my point is that somebody's making this decision. It's almost like the sin started there because people, because the Spirit wasn't with them making these plans out correctly. And it wasn't I don't think it was because they lost the battle. It was because the battle plans were made without God.
Well,
and why wasn't God there? Because of the sin.
Okay, so
Well, they apparently stole some pagan religious relics. It says
Achan.
Devoted things. That implies that they were some.
Well, my point is, where did it go bad?
Yeah,
I think it went bad before they actually fought. It went bad during the planning section.
Let's just assume that's correct. Did the people who were doing the planning know anything about Achan's sin?
No, but for
so
some reason,
if somebody else sinned somewhere, I could die?
No, well,
That's what happened.
It just seems like that people that were in the know would know that the Lord wasn't with them at the time, but
Did they inquire?
well, no, they didn't.
They didn't inquire.
They didn't. But why wouldn't they do it? Because
Why would you move forward one step without inquiring of the Lord?
well, a lot of people do that, do stuff without
Maybe
the
that's
Lord.
a mistake.
Well, that is the mistake.
You can't inquire every little old thing. You're supposed to
Well,
remember how the Lord has led you in the past and
sending
proceed.
3,000 men off to conquer a city isn't every little old thing.
Do you think the leaders might have known about this, but they sort of kept a blind eye and just didn't want to say anything about it?
Well, let's read on. They retreat from them
Where are you
because
reading?
I'm reading Joshua 7. I'm starting with let me start with verse 12. This is why the Israelites cannot stand against their enemies. They retreat from them because they themselves have now been condemned to destruction. I will not stay with you any longer unless you destroy the things you were ordered not to take. Is this God
But here,
getting upset?
The RSV says twice here, it says the devoted things, and that implies it's more than just don't take anything that belongs. No, they were getting into taking the pagan deities emblems.
Get up, purify the people, get them ready to come before me. Tell them to be ready tomorrow because I, the Lord God of Israel, have this to say. Israel, you have in your possession some things that I ordered you to destroy. So those are the devoted things you're talking about. You cannot stand against your enemies until you get rid of these things. Why not? The only thing that's changed here is God's attitude toward them, right?
No,
And
it's
this-
their attitude towards God.
These pagan items, it meant so four or five times it mentions devoted things that they're supposed to destroy them. That was probably one of the biggest. That's the way I would read it.
If you came to a city like Jericho, I mean, obviously we don't know what Jericho looked like. We don't have a picture back in those days. But where would be the most expensive, the most valuable things in that city? It would be in the temple of the pagan gods, wouldn't it?
Sure.
Sure, of course.
Or down in India a few months ago, they found some place had $1 billion worth of gold and all kinds of trinkets or whatever they do in India. Been there several hundred years.
Yeah. Okay, so what happened? So tell them in the morning they will be brought forward tribe by tribe. The tribe that I pick will then come forward, clan by clan. The clan that I pick will come forward, family by family. The family that I pick will come forward one by one. The one who is then picked out and found with the condemned goods will be burned along with his family and everything he owns, for he has brought terrible shame on Israel and has broken my covenant. Okay, early the next morning, Joshua brought Israel forward, tribe by tribe, and the tribe of Judah was picked out. He brought the tribe of Judah forward, clan by clan, and the clan of Zerah was picked out. Then he brought the clan of Zerah forward, family by family, and the family of Zabdi was picked out. He then brought Zabdi's family forward one by one, and Achan, the son of Carmi and grandson of Zabdi, was picked out. Joshua said to him, "My son, tell the truth here before the Lord, the God of Israel, and confess. Tell me now that what you have done, don't try to hide it from me." Okay? It's true, Achan answered, I have sinned against the Lord, Israel's God, and this is what I did. Among the things that we seized, I saw a beautiful Babylonian cloak, about 5 pounds of silver, and a bar of gold weighing over 1 pound. I wanted them so much that I took them. You will find them buried inside my tent with the silver at the bottom. So Joshua sent some men who ran to the tent and found that the condemned things really were buried there with the silver at the bottom. They brought them out of the tent, took them to Joshua and all the Israelites, and laid them down in the presence of the Lord. Joshua, along with all the people of Israel, seized Achan, the silver, the cloak, the bar of gold, together with Achan's sons and daughters, his cattle, donkeys, and sheep, his tent, and everything else he owned. And they took them to Trouble Valley. And Joshua said, Why have you brought such trouble on us? The Lord will now bring trouble on you. All the people then stoned Achan to death. They also stoned and burned his family and possessions. They put a huge pile of stones over him, which is there to this day. That is why that place is still called Trouble Valley. Then the Lord was no longer furious. Now this is an opportunity for us to learn something about God.
The daughters and sons went too, were stoned.
Now, if you ask school teachers who teach this story to the children, they don't have any question about Achan, and maybe no question about Achan's wife. I mean, obviously these are perpetrators, right? But the children? Was it fair for the children to die? And someone might say, well, maybe the children helped dig a hole in the middle of the tent so he could bury it. Well, yeah, but if your father said dig, what do?
And how young were the children that died? Were they
We
babies?
don't know. We don't know.
About the same age as those that died in the flood.
Yeah,
Thanks for help.
Or the firstborn in Egypt, right?
Or the firstborn in Egypt.
Well, this is still coming in the backdrop of a culture that's different than ours right now.
Does this have
no? I mean, there's no comparison actually, and how God deals with us now probably wouldn't have worked back then because of how they did things, who had authority, and all that.
You know, it could be that Achan wasn't the only one knew about this stuff.
Yeah. His family must have known.
It seems reasonable,
and they didn't confess.
That's right, and from the very beginning there was plenty of warning. I mean, out of the whole camp.
Yeah, how long did
Okay, it looks like it's the tribe of Judah. Somebody's coming out of the tribe of Judah. They watched that narrowly, kept closer and closer and closer. Nobody ever spoke a thing. And
So how did they narrow it down? What was the...
Well, we don't know exactly what they used. It says they cast lots. We don't know exactly how. Some people have said that they used a pot, and they would have like one stone that was white and the rest would be black. Something like that. They stick their hand in, and I don't know. That's one suggestion.
Now, if Achan had confessed earlier, would he have avoided that?
I mean, that's a
Don't
good
know.
question.
Already lost the people that were killed in the battle. They were already gone.
They were already gone, yeah. He was responsible for that.
Well, didn't God say that at the beginning, before they even found anybody, what's going to happen to them? So he'd have to stick with his word right then. I don't know if saying you were sorry at that time. See, it's just, I just can't, it's just hard to imagine what these people were like to have to deal with them like that.
there are similar kinds of stories like this in the Old Testament, certainly when the children of Israel were in the, in the 40 years and so forth. Are there any stories, I can't think of any, are any stories like this where somebody was confronted in a situation like this and they said, I did it, right off the bat? So they didn't come to this kind of a cataclysm?
I don't think so. I don't think of any right away. David, I suppose, would be the closest. When Nathan came to him, David said, I'm guilty.
Now, what
Well,
does
that
that
was after he
teach?
said that.
Yeah.
He had the
He
finger
told,
pointed at
he
him.
told a story, yeah.
What does that teach us about God?
Oh, good question. That's where we're going here now. Let's.
One other thing is that the story of Korah, Dathan and Abiram, a few years before this,
20,
yeah, not all
16.
Korah's children weren't all killed.
No.
So there's something different about the children of Achan than the children of Korah.
Yes.
And what was it? That probably the children of Korah didn't take part in his sin. The children here of Achan took part. They were complicit.
Okay, let's just ask a question. Is there any, would you say there's solid evidence that God was really involved in this story at all? Maybe it all just happened.
You want to rephrase that?
What are the chances?
What are the chances that this just happened and the idea that God was involved was just a fluke? God wasn't involved at all. Some people would try
God
to...
wasn't furious and...
God wasn't furious.
didn't make
He
the
didn't
choice.
help them make the choice. He
So
had
the-
nothing to do with
The
it.
lots.
So the story here that seems to indicate that God was involved is erroneously inspired.
Yeah, that, some people would say that.
Yeah, but why would a falsehood come out after they tore their clothes and prayed and pleaded to find out what was wrong, and then all of a sudden we got this idea that wasn't really true, but it kind of just sufficed to make everybody feel better, and then it doesn't make sense to me. So.
And how do they find the right person?
Yeah.
Did God guide that process?
Seems like it.
You choose one person out of millions, or at least a lot, even 100,000. That's pretty good odds, isn't it?
And that showed all the others that God knows what they're doing.
Exactly.
Too bad we don't use that system today.
No place to
Yeah.
hide.
Huh?
We need to find out how that
place to
Lot's thing
hide.
worked.
I'm sure glad God isn't furious with me.
Yeah, right. Well,
So's Myra.
Glad she's not furious with me either.
so
Yeah,
let's.
the furious part almost is like they're looking at God's representatives, and they were furious. So it's almost like they'd almost transfer it because looking at the representatives, like Joshua, he was probably furious about the whole thing.
We've lost
So-
36 innocent people.
Yeah. So the furious may be just looking at Joshua.
If you read on, what happened the next time they went down there to Ai?
It looked like it was going the same way. They
Someone went down,
yeah,
and then they run back.
yeah,
and
Israel set a trap basically, and
Ambushed.
yeah,
But if you look
and
at
they
the
wiped out
plans,
the city.
the
Yeah.
plans for this one seemed like it was coming together differently than the first time. I mean, you could tell by those plans that God was with them on making those plans.
So the difference is whether God is with them or not, right?
Well,
Does this
I'm
mean
saying that could have kept them from fighting in the first place if they were somehow sensitive to it, and they'd say, "Well, how come you're not with us? That you're not making these plans with?" But they were all confident. Just send a little bit less people down, and everything will be fine. But if there was some way to make it sensitive, where they knew that God wasn't with them, then all this stuff with Achan could have started before they actually went out and fought.
Does this story worry you a bit? I mean, here's the children of Israel, and the whole nation is defeated because one man sins. Now, we have a modern church that thinks it's going into the heavenly Canaan. What are the chances that one person's sin could keep us out?
How do you put that together?
that's scary.
And the group is affected by the individual.
Absolutely.
So you're saying that for a group to go in, everybody has to be good in the group, or else they're not going to go in?
Sort of sounds like that, doesn't it?
Well, if you put it together like that, I guess you could say that. But
Something is funny here. I thought when the children of Israel entered the promised land, and you read back over in Joshua, chapter 1, God says, don't worry, I'm going to take care of everything. Yeah. And here they're having to resort to skullduggery and roosts against Ai here and so forth. Where's all these hornets and bees and things that are supposed to go ahead of the children of Israel and take care of all that?
That problem was discussed back in Deuteronomy. If you look at Exodus 23, I'll just quote it very quick as we don't have time to go back and read it. Exodus 23, God said to the children of Israel, if you obey me and you follow me, I will lead the way into the land of Palestine. I will send hornets, I will send whatever panic ahead of me, depending which version you read, ahead of you, and you won't have to even fight. But when you get over to 40 years later, you get over to Deuteronomy chapter 20. And the story is very different. In fact, it's so different, I better read it to you. Look at Deuteronomy 20. But and I'm reading from verse 16, Deuteronomy 20, verse 16. But when you capture cities in the land that the Lord your God is giving you, kill everyone. Completely destroy all the people, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites, as the Lord ordered you to do. Kill them. so that they will not make you sin against the Lord by teaching you to do all the disgusting things that they do and the worship of their gods. So what happened? They weren't willing, and so now I should ask you, why did these orders change?
Because the people were not willing to allow God to give them the victory.
Because if
they
God did all the
in
fighting
the
and chased all the people out with his hornets or whatever, who would get the credit?
God would.
Oh dear. You mean we don't get any credit? No. That's a terrible thought. They would rather fight their way into Palestine, even if a bunch of them got killed, instead of letting God do it and let him getting the credit.
This is Joshua here. He's not that way. He's a good guy.
I'm reading to you God's directions. Are you doubting God's directions?
Well, maybe you're putting a twist on the theology or something.
I'm reading to you what my Bible says. Come on now, give me a break.
Well, you know, this corporate responsibility for the individual, several times, like God said, Abraham, leave your relatives, they're going to pollute you. In Revelation, come out of her, my people. Yeah. Don't, be separate from the sinners. And if people have a form of godliness without the power, you're supposed to have nothing to do with them. Yeah. And then Achan was killed. Could that be considered the shaking to purify the church before they went over into Canaan?
Do you think Achan was the only one that sinned in the camp?
It appears that he was.
Seems like it, doesn't it?
So he was shaken out.
Well, he was stoned out.
Stoned out. But I mean, God seems to really want a
pure people.
Pure people.
Yeah.
He says it several different times.
They didn't kill Rahab.
No.
I know. Yeah.
What's the difference?
Yeah.
We're going to see a number of stories as we move forward that are like that. Ruth is a very good example. God reaches out into pagan nations when he sees someone out there who is really clearly thinking and considering the issues and choosing God's side, and he picks you. I want you to be a part of my people.
And he's going to do that in Revelation. Other people are going to come in and some people are going to go out.
And very interestingly, in the Old Testament, it's mostly women.
That are coming in?
That are coming in.
And God pulled Ruth in, even though he'd said earlier, there will be no Moabite who will be part of my people.
That's right.
Really?
And Ruth was a Moabitess.
Yes.
And he said that how long before Ruth?
Not that long.
Not that long. Yeah, maybe, well, we don't know. No more than 100 or 200 years. Well, in fact, can't be even that long. No more than 100 years maximum. Yeah. Well, I'd like us to turn over, and we're going to just touch in the book of Judges, and we'll talk about more of it next time. But there's a lot of really incredible things in the book of Judges. Now, if you were like me when you were young, the book of Judges was a book of stories of heroes of the Bible. You know, they did let out in battles, and they conquered the enemies, and there was Samson. Well, he wasn't quite so good, but he had strong muscles at least. And there was Gideon, and he went out and conquered his enemies. And down the list, there was a list. You know, I mean, isn't this a book full of wonderful heroes, right? Well, it turns out that Judges is a book full of violence, immorality, backsliding, promises made to God that were later broken, and idolatry. It makes the children of Israel look very bad. If your church had passed through a set of circumstances like this, would you record it permanently and publish it for the world to read? Even assuming that all the stories are reported correctly, wouldn't it be best just to let them be forgotten? Why is the book of Judges in the Bible?
The Bible is about God. The book of Judges tells how deep God can go with these wicked people and pull them out, bring them out, save them, save some of them, and preserve them and preserve his name.
So I've done some awful things in my life. God could never save me. Is that proof that he could?
This is proof that he could.
Well, one of the things we need to remember here is who else is watching?
The onlooking universe.
Including
Satan.
both Satan's side and the good angel side. And now if you're in this situation and you're dealing with the people in the book of Judges, what do?
Abandon them.
Abandon them. Well, there's some talk about that.
Aren't you supposed to kind of cover those people with piles of stones?
The
You'd think so,
intentional sins.
huh? Yeah, right.
Now,
Well,
a little point here. In Judges, you say that they slid down into the depths.
mhm.
Where do you get that impression? I mean, how
Well-
do we know this isn't just kind of the way that people were even during Joshua's time?
Judges
Well,
I
2.
mean,
Look at Judges chapter 1. After Joshua's death, the people of Israel asked the Lord, which of our tribes should be first? The Lord answered, the tribe of Judah. The people of Judah said, the people of Simon, and so forth, and they went forward. And actually, I'm looking for a verse, and maybe it's at the end of Joshua. It says there, look back at Joshua 24. After that, the Lord's servant Joshua, son of Nun, died at the age of 110. That's Joshua 24:29. They buried him in his own land at Timnath-Serah in the hill country of Ephraim north of Mount Gash. As long as Joshua lived, the people of Israel served the Lord. And after his death, they continued to do so as long as those leaders were alive who had seen for themselves everything the Lord had done for Israel. The body of Joseph was brought up, etc. But then we come over to Judges, and almost immediately they're into all kinds of skullduggery and all kinds of messes, really. And I would like to, and we're running out of time here, but if you're with us, take out your Bible and read Judges 2 and 3, and that's where we'll pick up next time, because it says some very, very interesting and very provocative and challenging things about God in those chapters. It talks to us about God's anger and God's wrath and what he does when he gets angry, when he gets, quote, furious. See if you can figure it out for yourself. See you next week.